When my wife Lillian died, my son told me, "You can't bring Mom back, and Sienna's birthday only comes once a year." If there's a sentence that can freeze a man from the inside out, that was mine. The next morning, as I stood in my kitchen in Asheville, North Carolina, black tie too tight, knuckles pale on the phone, I dialed Brandon at 8:30 a.m. Lil's favorite mug was still on the counter, the one with the chipped rim and the words "Good morning." Sunshine faded by 1,000 washes. The house had that early morning quiet where you can hear every memory you wish you could forget. 4 rings. A thud of bass bled through the line, then my son's groggy voice, "Yeah, it's Dad." I straightened as if posture could add weight to truth. "The funeral starts at 11:30. Laughter burst somewhere behind him. I heard Sienna yelling about streamers, a blender roaring, someone cheering. Brandon cleared his throat. "Dad, I told you! Sienna's birthday party is tonight. We've had this planned for months. Your mother's funeral is today." I swallowed hard. "Once in a lifetime. Look, Mom isn't coming back. But Sienna only turns 32 once. We've got the caterer lined up, a DJ, a dessert wall, everything's set. You get it, right?" The line hummed in my ear a second before the dial tone took his place. I stared at Lil's reading glasses by the phone. The wall clock ticked to 8:47. Morning light hit my wedding ring just so, the same way it had on the day I promised Lillian everything. Funny how vows hold their shine even when hearts go dull. On the kitchen table sat the printed program I'd made the night before, Lillian Reed, 1959-2025, elegant font. Yellow lilies along the border because she loved them. Under pallbearers, I drew a slow line through Brandon Reed. The pen felt heavier than it should. The service at Riverside Chapel was gentle and kind. 20-something people came, neighbors, folks from church, a couple old hands from my company, Reed and Sons Contracting. People squeezed my shoulder and told me how wonderful Lil had been. Everyone asked where Brandon was. I tried the phrase I'd practiced. He had an important commitment. It tasted like ash every time, Lillian's sister. Joanne stood beside me at the graveside, both of us clutching tissues that had given up the fight. The pastor talked about forgiveness and family, heaven and home. A breeze ran its fingers through the oaks, while the first shovel of earth tapped her casket. I watched each scoop like I was counting down to an ending that had already arrived. We buried my wife without our son. When it was over, people made promises they meant in the moment. "Call if you need dinner. We'll stop by. You shouldn't be alone tonight." And then they stepped carefully back into their own lives. I drove home in her hybrid, because she always said it was better for the planet than my truck. The radio tried one of her favorite songs. I shut it off before the chorus could cut me in half. The house greeted me like a museum. Lil's silk scarf draped over a chair. Her book, The Secret Garden for the 100th time, open face down on the nightstand, a grocery list on the fridge, avocados, spinach, cinnamon. I hung my keys on the little wooden hook she'd insisted we install, the one I'd called silly, until it became the rhythm of coming home. I dropped into the brown leather chair she teased me about for clashing with her florals and looked at our wedding photo on the mantel. Lillian at 24 in her grandmother's lace, light pouring off her like it came from inside. We'd married across town at St. Matthew's in 1984, hands shaking, heart steady. I kept my promise. I worked like a man possessed, built the company from 3 jobs and a second-hand ladder to a fleet of trucks and a staff of 30. She kept her promise, too. She loved us through all of it. Memories arrived in uninvited waves. Brandon toddling across this same living room, diaper sagging, belly laughing while Lil held out her arms. Birthday cakes we baked at midnight, because we couldn't afford the bakery. She pulled doubles as a nurse at Mission Hospital, while I hustled bids by day and swung hammers by night. We told ourselves we were building something for Brandon. Some nights, when I'd get home after he was asleep, she'd whisper, "We're doing the right thing. Tommy." I'd kiss her palm and pretend I believed it without question. In our closet, tucked behind winter sweaters, I found a shoebox I hadn't seen before. Inside were Brandon's report cards, from crayon-smudged kindergarten to the framed diploma from the University of Tennessee. Lil had written notes on the back of each. "So proud of you, B. Our brilliant boy." There were photos, his cap and gown, that first condo he bought with a little help. Vacation snapshots from trips he'd taken while we stayed home to keep the lights on. At the bottom was a folded page in Lillian's neat hand. "My dear Tommy, whatever happens, don't let Brandon forget who we are. We gave him everything we knew how to give." I pray it was enough. Love and I sat on the edge of the bed with that letter in my lap until the sun drifted from gold to grey. Grief does a strange thing to time. It stretches and it compresses. Somewhere around 6 a.m. the next morning, I found myself at the mahogany desk in my den. Old invoices on one side, a blank legal pad on the other. I opened a spreadsheet and pulled the bank statements. At first I told myself I was just getting organized, but I knew what I was doing. I was taking inventory of the story we never admitted out loud. Tuition, 4 years, $56,000 each with fees. I remembered every cashier's office line, the calls when Brandon forgot a payment deadline, the relief in his voice when I said I'd handle it. MBA enrollment, $49,000 before he dropped out to pursue opportunities. The Europe opportunity, $32,000 in temporary expenses that lasted an entire summer of selfies. The house on Edgewood, $310,000 down payment plus me co-signing the mortgage, because they'd been so close to being approved on their own. The wedding at the Grove Park Inn, Sienna wanted simple but elegant, $68,000 after surprise add-ons. 2 new cars across the years, $28,000 and $34,000 because image matters in their friend group. The quick bridge loans for business ideas that never stood up long enough to have a name. The vacations they had to take to save their marriage from the stress of what exactly? I wrote the numbers column after column and added them twice just to be sure. When the total settled on the screen, I leaned back, stared at the ceiling and breathed out. $817,000. That wasn't just a sum. It was a biography. My father gave me a handshake and a toolbox when I left home. I had decided my son would never know that kind of wanting. Maybe that's where I went wrong. Maybe love that never says no is just a wage you pay to be needed. My phone lit up around 9:15 a.m. Brandon. For a second I saw him at 8 years old with grass stains on his knees. Then I saw him yesterday with a DJ drowning out his mother's grave. I let it ring 4 times and answered, "Hey, Dad. How are you? Holding up?" His tone had that practiced brightness I'd learned to recognize, the cheerfulness people wear when they're walking toward a cash register. "I'm managing," I said, eyes on the spreadsheet. "Good, good. Listen, quick thing. Sienna's party was amazing last night. Seriously, everyone's still texting about it. But we kind of overshot the budget. You know how it is, the little things add up. We've got about 15 grand due today. Band deposit, venue overage, the bracelet I got her." She cried when she saw it. "Anyway, could you wire that over? We'll square up as soon as—" No, silence. Bass thumped faintly on his end, like the party hadn't noticed the dawn. "What do you mean, no? Is there a problem with your account? I mean, I won't be giving you any more money." His voice sharpened the way metal does when it's dragged the wrong direction. "Are you serious right now? After everything this week? Mom would want you to help us. Your mother wanted you at her funeral, a beat. Then the old tactic. Fine, we'll figure it out. But if this is how you're going to be, don't expect us around much." "I understand," I said, and I meant it in ways he wouldn't grasp until later. I set the phone down and stared through my office window at the Blue Ridge rolling away in shades of honest blue. For the first time in a long time, I felt something other than sorrow. It wasn't anger. It was resolve, quiet, steady, overdue. I opened the file labeled Brandon Reed, employee. Reed & Sons Contracting had always been a family business in name more than in truth. Today that would change. I stacked performance reviews, client emails and expense reports into a single undeniable story. Missed deadlines. Inflated lunches. Site visits skipped. Complaints soothed because his last name matched mine. By 8:45 I called our HR director, Maya Patel. "I need you in my office at 9. "Understood," she said, gentler than the word required. I set my hands flat on the desk and pictured Lillian's smile, sunny and stubborn, as if she were telling me, "You know what's right, Tommy. Do it." At 7:30 a.m., I unlocked the glass doors to Reed & Sons Contracting and let the quiet swallow me whole. The lobby smelled like pine cleaner and blueprint paper, a scent I used to associate with pride. Today it smelled like overdue honesty. Sunlight slid down the framed photos on the wall, before and after shots of warehouses we'd turned into breweries. churches we'd saved from rot. In the middle row hung a portrait of Brandon in a navy suit I'd paid for, arms crossed, grin wide, the caption beneath reading Director of Client Relations. For the first time, I didn't see my son. I saw a vacancy in a nice jacket. In my office, I finished arranging the documents I'd stacked the night before. Write-ups Maya had filed with care, emails from clients with subject lines like follow-up again, card statements with dinners that looked like vacations, and a spreadsheet of job sites he'd left early to beat traffic. I added one last item to the pile, a printout of our company handbook, the page that explained at-will employment and company-issued equipment protocols. Not because I wanted to play gotcha, because I didn't want anything left to chance. At 8:45 on the dot, Maya Patel knocked and stepped in, polished, composed, the kind of person who could calm a storm just by naming it. She'd been hinting for months, careful nudges in private. "We need to coach him harder. He's missing sign-offs again." I'd thanked her and changed the subject to budgets. Today her eyes flicked over the table, then to me. She didn't ask if I was sure. "I'll have the separation packet ready," she said. "It is on standby to disable access. We'll need your approval for a security escort." "Standard procedure," I said, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. "Let's do it by the book," she nodded once. "I'll bring in Mike from security when you call." At 9:27 a.m., laughter floated up the hall. Brandon strolled past the reception desk, late by 15 minutes as if tardiness were a form of charm. He stopped at the machine to make a coffee he never finished, flirted a little with our receptionist, and checked his phone with that little half-smile people wear when they're scrolling through other people's lives. I pressed the intercom. "Brandon, my office." Now, a pause. The smile slipped just a hair. "Sure thing, Dad, 2 minutes." Now his shoes made a different sound then, less swagger, more weight. He opened the door and saw Maya already seated beside my desk, with a slim folder in her lap. Confusion put a wrinkle between his eyebrows. "What's with the formal setup?" I kept my hands folded. "Brandon, your employment with Reed & Sons is terminated effective immediately." He laughed. A reflex, not joy. "Very funny. What is this really?" "Please have a seat." I slid the paperwork forward. "You are being let go for performance-related reasons and a pattern of conduct inconsistent with company expectations. Your position is eliminated as part of an internal restructuring. You'll receive compensation for unused PTO. There is no severance." He didn't sit. He grabbed a page and scanned until legal language made his eyes dart. "You can't do this. This is a family business. This is a business," I said. "And it will remain one. This is about yesterday, isn't it?" He shot back, voice cracking at the edge. "I told you I was sorry about the scheduling. Sienna's party was important to her. We can talk this out." Maya kept her gaze neutral. "Brandon, IT has already disabled your accounts. Security will escort you to collect personal belongings from your office. Company property, laptop, phone, card keys, the truck fob must be surrendered before you leave." He rounded on me, color rising. "You're embarrassing me in front of everyone." "I'm protecting the people who work here," I said evenly. "Clients included." He tried one more tactic, softer, familiar. "Dad, come on. Mom wouldn't want this." Something in me steadied like a post-set plum. "Your mother wanted accountability. She lived it. Sit down and sign." He didn't. He slammed the paper back onto the desk. "This is revenge." "You're not thinking straight." I pressed the button. Mike, a mountain in a blazer, appeared with the restraint of a man who's done this before. There was a small crowd collecting in the hallway, project managers pretending to read their phones, accountants peeking from doorways. The murmur of people who've been waiting for a shoe to drop and finally hear it hit the floor. I hated that. I also knew they deserved to see me do the thing I should have done 2 years ago. "Brandon," Maya said, tone gentle, words precise. "Please hand me the badge, phone, and keys." He looked at her like she'd betrayed him personally, then at me like I had. He tossed the badge. He set the phone down hard enough to rattle a pen. The truck fob came last, reluctant, the way a child gives up a toy he didn't pay for. Mike stepped back, an open palm toward the door. "We'll give you 5 minutes to gather your personal items." As he left, Brandon grabbed the coffee mug he'd bought on our trip to the Smokies, a ceramic bear that used to make us both laugh. He took the framed photo of his wedding day, Sienna laughing up at him under a shower of rose petals I'd paid for by the bucket. He didn't take a single notebook. When he was gone, the office exhaled. Maya slid the signed forms toward me. Access revoked. HR packet complete. If he returns, security will be notified. Thank you, I said. My voice sounded like gravel under tires. The receptionist buzzed a minute later. Mr. Reed, Sienna's here. She's coming back. I didn't give permission. I barely had time to stand before she swept in anyway. Heels quick on marble, hair immaculate, perfume following in a bright, expensive wave. She pointed at me as if she were giving a direction to a delivery driver. How dare you humiliate my husband? Brandon trailed behind her, complexion sallow now that the adrenaline had faded. He hovered near the door like a man who wasn't sure if he should run or beg. Sienna, he murmured, let me... No. She cut him without looking. I'm speaking. She turned the full heat of her anger on me. We have obligations. A lifestyle. You can't just flip a switch and cut off your family. If this business has sons in the name, then pay the son. This is a private workplace, I said, still behind my desk. You need to leave. Her laugh had too many teeth. We'll see about that. We'll sue for wrongful termination. We'll sue for our share when the will is read. I know about the life insurance. She ticked off threats like a grocery list. At-will employment, Maya said calmly. No contract. No protected class claim. No severance requirement. And estate matters aren't handled here. Sienna's face went red, then a deeper red. Lillian would be ashamed of you. She leaned forward, hand flat on my desk. You're having a breakdown, Thomas. Everyone can see it. You fire your son the day after a funeral. Who does that? Security, I said, not to argue but to end it. Mike reappeared with another guard. The hallway onlookers turned into shadows, as Sienna realized she was about to be escorted out of a building she used to breeze through. Potted palms parting for her like courtiers. I'm not leaving, she snapped, ratcheting up from icy to shrill. This is harassment. This is theft. This... Sienna, Brandon pleaded, the last thread of dignity unraveling. Please. They ushered her toward the door. Her voice carried all the way to reception. You're finished, old man. Everyone will hear about this. When the sound finally drained from the lobby, Brandon remained. He closed the door softly, sat in the chair he'd refused 10 minutes earlier, and stared at the blotter on my desk. I'm all you have left, he whispered. The line was polished, old, worn smooth from use. I'm your only family. No, I said, and I didn't raise my voice to say it. You're someone who used to act like my son. He flinched like I'd struck him. What do you want me to say? Nothing. I looked at the pile of documents, then back at him. I want you to do something. But not here. Not today. He stood slowly, picked up the wedding photo, and then set it back down. We'll talk, he said, but it sounded like a question. He left without looking at anyone. Mike closed the door behind him. The soft click of a boundary finally set. I took Brandon's executive portrait off the management wall myself. The blank space it left looked honest. By late morning, I was in a different kind of glass tower. 16th floor. Southeast corner. The law firm of Cho and Whitaker, where the rugs are thick and the assistants never misspell your name. Daniel Cho had been my lawyer since we were both scrapping in smaller offices. He rose when I walked in, concern replacing his usual dry humor. Tom, he said, I'm sorry about Lillian. Thank you. I sat, set my leather folio on his desk and unlatched it. I'm rewriting everything. Routine updates after a death are smart, he started. Not updates, I said. A reinvention. I slid across Lillian's will, our insurance policies, the spreadsheet I'd made at 6 a.m., and a single sheet with a name at the top. The Lillian Reed Foundation. I want every major asset insulated and pointed towards something she'd be proud of. Scholarships for nursing students, a fund for hospice care in Buncombe County, grants for cancer research. An irrevocable trust owns the business. I retain control while I'm alive. On my death, the foundation takes it all. Daniel's eyebrows climbed, then settled into something like respect. Excluding Brandon? Explicitly, I said. And any heirs of his, present or future. He didn't rush. Good lawyers don't. He asked about my capacity, and I answered with dates, details, account numbers from memory. He asked about intent, and I told him the truth, that love without guardrails had become neglect. That grief had cleared a fog I didn't know I'd been living in. That Lillian's voice in my head said, Aim our love at something that will multiply it. We'll need to change beneficiary designations, draft a new will, living will, healthcare proxy, durable power of attorney, he said, already outlining steps on a yellow legal pad. We'll record contemporaneous notes about your decision-making. I'll bring in 2 witnesses for signatures. You understand this will put you and Brandon on a path that may not return. I looked out his window at the city spread below. The storefronts we'd restored, the roofs we'd replaced, the skyline Lillian loved to point at from the overlook. That path started yesterday, I said. This just makes it legal. Daniel nodded once. Then let's build it right. By the time Daniel finished dictating the clauses for the new will, the sun had shifted across his blinds, striping his mahogany desk in alternating bands of light and shadow. He called in his paralegal and 2 witnesses to watch as I initialed page after page. The foundation charter, the trust documents, the beneficiary amendments. Each signature felt less like revenge and more like breathing clean air after years in a closed room. Daniel spoke quietly, his tone that of a friend first and lawyer second. Tom, I have to ask for the record. Are you doing this out of anger? No, I answered, my pen poised above the final line. I'm doing it out of clarity. When I finished, the room was silent except for the scratch of his fountain pen adding his own signature. With those strokes, 35 years of enabling turned into an irrevocable trust. Brandon Reed no longer existed in my legal world. I left the firm with 2 folders in hand, one for the foundation, one for my personal estate, and a curious lightness in my chest. For the first time since Lillian's funeral, I could breathe without the taste of resentment. Outside, Asheville shimmered under late afternoon sun. People hurried along Biltmore Avenue carrying shopping bags, phones, lives. They looked unaware that one man walking among them had just burned a family tree down to its root and planted something new in its place. The next morning, the whispers began. At the monthly meeting of the Asheville Country Club, the board gathered in the usual oak-paneled conference room overlooking the golf greens. The air smelled faintly of polish and money. I'd been treasurer for 15 years, long enough to recognize the weight of silence when people had heard something they weren't supposed to. Tom, said Robert McAdams, the club president, as we shook hands. The memorial service was lovely. Lillian would have approved. Thank you, I said. His wife Susan leaned in just enough to lower her voice. I kept waiting to see Brandon. Was he traveling? I could have offered a half-truth. Instead, I gave them the whole one. He chose not to attend. Said his wife's birthday took precedence. You could have heard the tick of the grandfather clock across the room. Someone's coffee cup clinked too hard against the saucer. Then came the murmur, disbelief turning into quiet outrage. Unthinkable, one of the board members muttered. Within the hour, the story traveled faster than any newsletter. The Ladies' Bridge Club heard it before dessert was served. By evening, it was gospel truth at every dinner table that mattered in our small city. I hadn't planned it. I hadn't needed to. Asheville's old families took loyalty and decency as personal creeds. They had no patience for the kind of son who skipped his mother's funeral for a birthday party. 3 days later, Brandon began to feel the consequences. He called that Thursday evening. I didn't pick up, but his voicemail trembled between anger and confusion. Dad, people are canceling meetings. The country club said my membership is under review. Even my golf partners stopped returning calls. What's going on? What was going on was social gravity. The same people who once toasted his bright future now treated him like an unpaid tab. Sienna's yoga studio called her no longer a good fit. Her favorite salon found her appointments double booked. Their dinner reservations at the upscale restaurants mysteriously disappeared. Within a week, Brandon's polished world began to crumble quietly, elegantly, the way reputation always does in a town small enough for everyone to share one conscience. Meanwhile, I poured my energy into something that finally felt like living again. The Lillian Reed Foundation came to life inside a modest rented office downtown. A faded mural of the Blue Ridge Mountains covered one wall. Lillian would have loved it. Daniel's assistant, Claire, helped me set up the legal accounts and 501c3 registration. We drafted our mission statement together to honor compassion through education, healthcare, and community support. I signed the first check for a nursing scholarship at our local community college. The recipient was a young woman named Elena Torres, 21, working nights at the hospital cafeteria while caring for her grandmother. When she came to thank me in person, she clutched my hands and said through tears, "I'll make your wife proud, Mr. Reed." I believed her. That night, as I sat in Lillian's favorite chair, I told her photo about Elena. "She reminds me of you, all heart, too little sleep." The photo smiled back, as it always did. But peace never lasts long when someone like Brandon feels cornered. On Monday morning, my receptionist buzzed me. "Mr. Reed, there's a Mrs. Sienna Reed in the lobby. She doesn't have an appointment. Tell her I'm unavailable." A minute later, the door burst open anyway. Sienna stormed in, eyes red but voice sharp as glass. Brandon followed, quieter, wearing the same exhaustion I'd seen on his mother's face the week she finished chemo, but without the dignity. "You've destroyed us," she spat. "We can't get loans, nobody will hire Brandon. People whisper when we walk into restaurants. You did this." I stayed seated, pen balanced between my fingers. I told the truth. "The rest took care of itself." "You're vindictive," she hissed. "Do you know what it's like to be blacklisted in your own town?" "Yes," I said evenly. "It's called consequence." Brandon stepped forward, palms raised in the universal gesture of peace offering. "Dad, please. Maybe we said things we shouldn't. Let's just start over." He looked smaller somehow, deflated. "Like a boy asking to come inside after breaking a window. Start over." I echoed. "You missed your mother's burial. You called me petty for grieving. You fired your own decency before I ever fired you." Sienna's composure cracked. "We're your family." "No," I said quietly, rising to my feet. "You're adults who made choices. And now for the first time you're meeting them." Maya appeared in the doorway, sensing trouble. I nodded slightly. She escorted them out before Sienna could find another word sharp enough to throw. When the door clicked shut, I sat back down and breathed in the silence. It was the kind of silence that hummed with finality. 2 weeks later, a small notice appeared in the Asheville Gazette. Local philanthropist establishes nursing scholarship in late wife's memory. Thomas Reed, founder of Reed & Sons Contracting, has launched a foundation to support education and health initiatives across Buncombe County. The first grants will be awarded this spring. I clipped the article and tucked it beside Lillian's letter. It felt right that her handwriting and her legacy shared the same drawer. That evening, as the mountains turned blue-gray outside my window, I poured myself a small glass of bourbon and toasted her. "They'll remember your name for the right reasons now, Lil." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think this makes you noble. You'll die alone. I didn't need to ask who it was." I deleted it and turned off the phone. Outside, wind swept through the dogwoods. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The following month, the financial dominoes began to fall exactly as planned. Daniel's firm had processed my formal withdrawal as guarantor on Brandon's mortgage and loans. The bank followed up with letters, then calls. By early summer, Brandon's name appeared on the county's delinquent payments list. I received a polite email from David Harrison. "Manager of First National Bank, Mr. Reed, as per your withdrawal of guarantee. Foreclosure proceedings will begin in 30 days, unless payment is received in full." I responded with one line, "Please proceed according to protocol." Justice. It seemed was simply math written in ink, and yet, late at night, when the air turned still, I sometimes caught myself whispering to Lillian's photograph, "I hope I'm doing this right." But then I'd remember her journal entry, the one she'd hidden away in the box. Maybe we gave him too much. Maybe that's the mistake love makes when it forgets to teach gratitude. Those words, more than any law or ledger, reminded me that what I was doing wasn't vengeance. It was the last lesson our son would ever get from us. 6 months after Lillian's passing, the Asheville Gazette ran another headline, "Reed & Sons Contracting donates $200,000 to cancer research." The photo showed me handing over the check, smiling beside the hospital director. Behind the smile was something steadier. Peace. I returned home to find an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single photo, Brandon and Sienna standing in front of a U-Haul, the house behind them stripped bare. On the back, in shaky handwriting, it said, "We hope you're happy I was, but not for the reason they thought." I was happy because the world had finally balanced itself again, because love and loyalty, when misused, had met their natural correction, and somewhere, I imagined Lillian watching from the place where all wrongs come right, whispering the same thing she'd said on our last anniversary. Do what's right? Tommy, even when it hurts, I'd done just that. Summer in Asheville had that thick, humming quality, air heavy enough to bend sound, carrying cicadas and far-off thunder in the same breath. I spent those months watching the world rearrange itself, quiet and inevitable. Brandon and Sienna's decline wasn't explosive. It was methodical, like a foundation rotting from underneath while the paint still looked fresh. It began with the mortgage. David Harrison from First National called me personally. "Mr. Reed," he said, voice taut with discomfort, "the payment on your son's property is now 60 days overdue. As you're aware, your withdrawal as guarantor means the account's fully in their name. We've mailed final notice." I could almost hear the apology he wanted to add, but I saved him the trouble. "I understand, David. Do what you need to do," he hesitated. "I thought you should know they've stopped answering calls." Then there's nothing left to discuss. When I hung up, I sat for a while in the den, staring at the afternoon light filtering through Lillian's lace curtains. She'd chosen that pattern on a whim 20 years ago. "It softens the room," she'd said. Funny how something delicate could outlast everything built to be strong. Meanwhile, Brandon was discovering the brutal math of reputation. His job search had become a full-time humiliation. One by one, interviews evaporated. Positions filled. Change direction. We'll keep your resume on file. He started trimming his resume, hiding that he'd been at Reed & Sons. But Asheville wasn't big enough for secrets, and anyone with Wi-Fi could find the story. Local business owner fires son after wife's funeral drama. Sienna fared no better. Her luxury brand influencer sponsorships quietly disappeared. Invitations stopped arriving. The last straw came at her beloved Bergdorf's boutique downtown, where she tried to buy a dress on credit, and the clerk returned her card with an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Reed, your account is on hold." Sienna's cheeks burned crimson as she demanded to speak to a manager. The manager, younger than her, didn't blink. "You may wish to resolve outstanding balances before making further purchases." When she stormed out, the glass door caught her reflection. Elegant clothes, perfect hair, eyes hollowed by panic. For the first time she saw what she'd become, an accessory past season. Their house on Hawthorne Street told its own story. The once pristine lawn grew patchy, sprinklers silent since the water company sent its final notice. The white shutters turned grey with grime. Delivery vans stopped coming. Neighbours whispered but didn't wave. The golden couple who'd once hosted summer parties now hid behind drawn curtains. I didn't take pleasure in it. Not exactly. It was more like watching gravity pull something back to where it belonged. Every few weeks, an envelope arrived at my office. Unpaid property tax warnings. Bank notices addressed care of guarantor. I forwarded each to Daniel's office unopened. He would handle it. That's what lawyers were for, keeping conscience tidy. One Friday afternoon, Maya buzzed my intercom. "Mr. Reed, there's a Mr. Brandon Reed in the lobby. Says it's urgent." I paused before answering. "Send him in." He entered with a cautious gait, like someone approaching an unpredictable dog. The man standing before me hardly resembled the son in the glossy office photo I'd removed months ago. He'd lost weight. His hair, once carefully styled, hung limp. His suit, I recognized it. One I'd bought him years earlier, sagged around the shoulders. "Dad," he started, voice rough. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. "You're here. Talk." He sat, eyes darting to the nameplate on my desk as if it might offer him mercy. "I messed up. I know that. Missing Mom's funeral. God, it was stupid. I was just, I don't know, trying not to think about losing her. Sienna pushed the party thing, and I didn't stop her. But you can't keep punishing me forever." "Forever?" I said quietly. "You made your choice 7 months ago. Time just caught up. I'm your son." His voice cracked. People make mistakes. Children make mistakes. Adults face consequences. He leaned forward, desperate. "We're drowning. The mortgage is collapsing. Credit's gone. Sienna's losing it. I can't even get a job interview without them Googling me. You could fix this with one call, one transfer. Isn't there any part of you that pities you?" I finished. Plenty of parts do, but pity isn't the same as trust. He exhaled hard through his nose, anger finally breaking through the politeness. So that's it? You're going to sit up here behind your desk and watch your own son go under. Brandon, I said, and the name felt like a eulogy. I built this company from nothing because no one ever bailed me out. You've spent your life expecting someone to. That's why you're sinking. Not because of me, because you never learned how to swim. He stared at me for a long time, something hard and mean sharpening behind his eyes. Then he stood, shoulders tight. Mom would hate what you've become. Mom would recognize what I finally remembered how to be. He didn't slam the door when he left. The soft click was worse. By autumn, the foreclosure notice went public record. 1247 Hawthorne Street. Auction scheduled for October 16th, 10 a.m., County Courthouse steps. I didn't plan to attend. But the morning of, I found myself driving downtown anyway, parking across the street from the courthouse with a thermos of black coffee and an ache I couldn't name. The crowd was small. Investors in suits, a few curious onlookers, a local reporter pretending to check her phone. The auctioneer read the property description in a flat voice. Brandon and Sienna stood off to the side, pale and motionless, like actors stuck in a play they no longer wanted to perform. When bidding started, one of Daniel's associates raised her hand. Opening bid $280, the auctioneer droned. Another buyer countered. The numbers climbed. $290, $300, $305. At $317,000, Daniel's associate said, "Final offer." Going once, going twice. Bang, Sienna let out a sound that didn't belong to language. Half sob, half scream. Brandon just stared at the pavement. I rolled down my car window far enough to hear the final words. "Sold to Miss Claire Morgan, representing the Lillian Reed Foundation." Brandon's head snapped up. He scanned the crowd until he spotted her. Claire, my paralegal, standing calm with a folder tucked under her arm. The recognition hit him like a punch. He started forward, shouting something I couldn't hear before courthouse security intercepted him. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't need to. Watching was enough. Everything Lillian and I had built, and everything he'd squandered, was now legally, irrevocably back where it belonged. 2 weeks later, a moving truck parked outside 1247 Hawthorne. I drove by early, the sky bruised purple with rain. Brandon stood on the porch staring at the for sale sign that now bore the foundation's logo. He looked up as I slowed, eyes narrowing with a mix of disbelief and fury. "How could you do this?" he shouted, stepping toward the curb. I rolled down the window. "I didn't do anything," I said evenly. "The bank did." Sienna emerged behind him, clutching a box of clothes, mascara streaking her cheeks. "You're heartless," she screamed. "This is our home." "No," I said. "It was my wife's investment. You just lived in it." Her next words were drowned by the growl of the moving truck's engine. I drove away before they finished loading the first box. That night, Daniel called. "Transfer's complete. The foundation now owns the property outright. What happens to them?" I asked. "They'll get whatever the bank grants for remaining equity." "Not much." "Good," I said. "Maybe they'll learn what earned feels like." Daniel hesitated. "Tom, are you sure you're at peace with all this?" "I'm not sure peace is the goal anymore," I said. "But I'm sure it's right." By December, Brandon and Sienna were gone, address forwarding to a P.O. box in another town. I didn't ask which. Asheville winter rolled in quiet and cold, blanketing the empty house on Hawthorne in the same snow that fell over Lillian's grave. The foundation began renovation plans by January. Volunteers painted the walls. Contractors from my company, men who once worked under Brandon's casual supervision, installed new floors and bright windows. When it was finished, a young family, the Ramirez's, moved in, a mechanic, a teacher, 2 little kids who rode bikes down the same driveway where Brandon used to park his leased BMW. One Saturday afternoon I visited. The yard was alive with laughter and chalk drawings. Mrs. Ramirez offered me coffee in the kitchen that used to be Sienna's domain. She didn't know who I was, just that the foundation had made their dream possible. "We'll take good care of it," she said, smiling. "I know you will," I said. Driving home, I realized something simple and strange. I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. Tired in a way that felt clean. When I got home, I sat in Lillian's chair, journal in hand, and wrote a single line beneath her old note. "We gave him everything. Now we've given the world something better." Outside, the first snow of the year began to fall, soft and silent, like forgiveness that didn't need to be spoken. It was late November, nearly a year since Lillian's passing, when the past decided to find my doorstep again. The air outside had turned sharp. The trees in our neighborhood were stripped bare, except for the stubborn oaks clinging to a few rust-colored leaves. I'd spent the afternoon pruning Lillian's rose bushes. She'd have scolded me for trimming them too early, but I needed the quiet. Needed to keep my hands moving. I was halfway through reheating soup when headlights swept across the living room curtains. They lingered. Then a long pause. I knew before the doorbell rang who it was. You can sense your own blood even when it's curdled. Through the peephole, Brandon, unshaven, hollow-eyed. His clothes didn't fit anymore, jacket too big, shoes scuffed down to the sole. Behind him, a dented Toyota idled with one working headlight. He stood there for a full minute, shifting from foot to foot before pressing the bell again. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Dad," he said, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "Can I talk to you?" I studied him in silence, letting the cold air fill the space between us. His breath came out in clouds. "You're talking now," I said. "Please," he whispered, glancing over my shoulder into the house. "Just a few minutes." I stepped aside enough for him to enter the foyer, but no farther. The smell hit first, cheap motel detergent and stale smoke. He stood awkwardly by the coat rack, eyes scanning the photos on the wall. His gaze lingered on the portrait of Lillian in her garden hat, smiling with a basket of daisies. I saw his throat tighten. "I know I don't deserve to be here," he started. "But I need to say this." I folded my arms. "Then say it." He took a shaky breath. "I messed up everything. The house, the job, Sienna, she left last month. Moved in with her ex, the guy with the restaurant chain. I'm living above a laundromat off Route 6, working nights at the gas station." He laughed softly, without humor. "I finally know what a 4 a.m. shift feels like." I said nothing. He took it as permission to keep going. "I thought money fixed everything. That's what you taught me, right? That working hard and earning meant you loved your family. So when you gave, I took, because I thought that's how we showed love too. But I get it now. I get what Mom meant when she said you can't buy respect." He rubbed his hands together for warmth. "I know I can't undo what I said about the funeral. I've replayed it every night since. I hear my voice, the way it must have sounded to you. I'd give anything to take it back. Still, I said nothing." He looked down, then shifted tactics like he always did when silence unnerved him. "You shouldn't have to be alone in this big house," he said, softly now, almost rehearsed. "I could help out. Cook dinners. Keep you company. You and me, maybe start again." I caught it then, and the pivot. The subtle slide from apology to opportunity. The same rhythm he'd used his entire life. So I asked, "When's your mother's birthday?" He blinked, thrown by the question. June 15th? "August 7th, I said quietly. "She was allergic to June, remember? Pollen season." His face fell. I just... What was her favorite flower?" He hesitated, groping for the answer. "Roses?" "Daisies," I said. "She loved daisies. The same ones on her grave." I let the silence that followed do what words couldn't. "You didn't just skip her funeral, Brandon. You never knew her at all. Something broke in him then. Frustration, pride, maybe both. Why are you doing this?" "I came here trying to make things right." "No," I said. "You came here because you ran out of people to ask." His shoulders stiffened. "So what, you're saying you can't forgive me?" "I forgave you the day I buried your mother," I said. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting what a person is." That hit harder than I intended. His jaw clenched. "I'm trying, Dad, I'm trying to change. But you're punishing me for being human." "Human," I repeated. "Your mother worked herself half to death for you. She believed in your better self even when I didn't see it. And you couldn't give her one day." He looked at me like a cornered animal. Then came the real plea, the one behind every word. "I just need a little help to get back on my feet. That's all. I'll pay you back." "I swear, there it is," I murmured. "The same song, different verse." His eyes flashed. "I said I'd pay you back." "With what, Brandon?" I gestured at the threadbare coat, the trembling hands. "You don't even know what that word means." He stepped closer, anger overtaking shame. "Mom would have helped me." "Your mother," I said evenly, and was kind. "She also saw through you before she died." That stopped him. "What?" I turned toward the hallway and pulled open the drawer of the side table, the one that still held Lillian's journal. I flipped it to the page I'd marked months ago and handed it to him. Her handwriting, small and careful, covered half the page. I'm worried Brandon only loves our money. What if we've raised a child who can't love us without it? I pray I'm wrong, he read it once. Then again, his lips parted but no sound came. Finally, she wrote that about me? She wrote it for me, I said, so I'd remember what she'd already learned. He shook his head, tears starting to gather, anger fighting to stay alive. You twisted her words. You always twist things. She changed her will, Brandon, before she passed. She left everything to the foundation because she knew you'd waste it. That did it. The last thread of civility snapped. You think this makes you righteous? He spat, eyes shining with fury. You're nothing but a bitter old man hiding behind Mom's name. She'd be disgusted. And you'd know that how? I asked quietly. I didn't even bother to see her one last time. He froze, caught between rage and guilt. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. I hope you die alone in this house. I didn't flinch. I already did, Brandon. The night she left. He stared at me, trembling, and for a moment I thought he might swing at me. But he didn't. He just turned, slammed the door so hard the frame rattled, and left. I stood there listening to his car rev, then fade into the distance. Then I walked to the kitchen, turned off the soup still simmering on the stove, and poured myself a cup of tea. The house hummed with quiet. It wasn't peace exactly, but something close, the silence that follows when a wound finally scabs over. A week passed. I didn't hear from him. Didn't expect to. Then one cold morning in December, I found an envelope in the mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single key, the spare house key I'd given him 10 years ago, and a note written in block letters. You won. I'm gone. No signature, but none was needed. I placed the key on the mantel beside Lillian's photo, right where it belonged. It gleamed faintly in the morning light, a small quiet end to a loud, painful chapter. By spring, the world had found its rhythm again. The Lillian Reed Foundation had expanded to 3 scholarship programs and a hospice grant. The local paper ran another piece titled, From Grief to Giving, One Man's Mission to Honor His Wife. I read it over breakfast and smiled. Not because of pride, but because the article mentioned Lillian by name more than mine. She deserved that. That same afternoon I drove out to Riverside Cemetery with a fresh bouquet of daisies. The grass around her headstone had grown tall. I knelt to trim it back like I always did. The stone was simple. Lillian Grace Reed, 1959-2025. Beloved wife, cherished teacher, endless heart. I told her about the foundation's work, about Elena, the scholarship student who'd just graduated nursing school, about the Ramirez's who'd painted the old Hawthorne house bright yellow and planted a small vegetable garden. You'd like them, I said softly. They remind me of us, tired but grateful. When I finally stood to leave, I noticed something tucked beneath the bouquet, a crumpled piece of paper weighed down by a small stone. I unfolded it carefully. I'm sorry, Mom, I really am. The handwriting was shaky, but it was his. For the first time in a long while, I let myself cry. Not the sharp kind of grief, but the tired, quiet kind that comes when a storm finally runs out of rain. That night, I sat by the window, watching the lights of Asheville twinkle below. The phone buzzed once. Unknown number. A text. Got a steady job now. Pumping gas, saving a little. Hope you're okay. Tell Mom I'm trying. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. Some lessons don't require applause. Instead, I whispered into the dark, he's learning, Lil, slowly, but he's learning. And for the first time since she left, I felt something I hadn't dared to hope for. Peace. Spring folded gently into early summer that year. By May, the air in Asheville carried that sweet blend of honeysuckle and street coffee that made the whole city smell half awake. The Lillian Reed Foundation was thriving. 3 full-time employees, 24 volunteers, and more applicants than we could possibly fund. Each morning, I'd drive downtown, past the courthouse steps where the Hawthorne Street house had been auctioned, past the mural Lillian had always loved of the mountains painted in golds and blues. She used to say, no matter what changes, those hills stay. She was right. The world had steadied around me. The grief had dulled, replaced by the steady rhythm of purpose. Meetings, check signings, interviews with grateful students. People at the cafe knew my order before I spoke it. Black coffee, 2 sugars, whole milk. Simple things held weight again. Then one morning, routine broke. I'd stopped at Morning Glory Diner, the same place Lillian used to drag me to after Sunday service when she wanted to people watch and laugh about how every waitress called her Hon. It was one of those places that refused to die no matter how many chains opened nearby. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped. In behind the counter, wiping down tables, was Brandon. For a moment I thought I was seeing things, but then he turned and time caught up to us both. He froze mid-motion, rag in hand, mouth opening before words came out. "Dad." I stood there, the smell of bacon grease and coffee between us. He looked older, not just tired, but rebuilt in a quieter way. His hair had gone a little grey at the temples. His posture had lost that old arrogance, replaced by something humbler, almost steady. He hurried around the counter. Let me get you a seat." I didn't resist. He guided me to a booth near the window, wiping it down again even though it was spotless. "Coffee?" he asked. I nodded. He poured it himself, hands shaking only a little. On the house, I took a sip. It wasn't good coffee. It was honest coffee. Strong, burnt at the edges, poured by someone who'd earned his blisters. "How long have you been working here?" I asked finally. He rubbed the back of his neck. "About 3 months now. Got promoted to shift lead last week." His smile was small but real. "It's not much, but it's something." I nodded. "Something's a good start." He looked down at his shoes. "I'm sorry about everything. I know I said that before, but back then I was just trying to say the right words. This time I mean it." I didn't answer right away. I studied him the way a carpenter studies a piece of reclaimed wood, checking for cracks that won't mend, but also noticing how the grain glows where it's been worn. "I read your note," I said. He blinked. "At the cemetery." "Yes, your mother would have appreciated it." His jaw clenched slightly. "I go there sometimes. Before work. Bring her daisies. That did something to me, something soft. I felt Lillian's ghost beside me, her warm hand on mine whispering, 'See, he's learning.' I got a little apartment up on Merriman," Brandon said quietly. "Nothing fancy, 1 room. But I pay the rent myself. I even started taking night classes again. Business management." "Funny, huh?" He chuckled nervously. "Trying to finally finish what I started." I sipped my coffee and met his eyes. "That's good, son." The word son hung between us like a fragile bridge, unsure if it could hold the weight of history. "I've been saving too," he went on, eyes bright with something like pride. "Might open a small repair shop someday. I remember you showing me how to fix that first generator when I was a kid." I smiled faintly. "You cross-threaded every bolt that day." He laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. "Yeah, I think about that sometimes." The waitress brought a plate of pancakes for the next table. Brandon took it over, exchanged a few easy words with the customers, smiled, then came back. I noticed how people greeted him. Not like a fallen man. Like a neighbor. "You look good," he said, sliding back into the booth. "Better than last year." "I am," I said truthfully. "The foundation keeps me busy. We awarded our 20th scholarship last month. Lillian's name's on every certificate." He nodded, eyes glistening. "She'd love that." We sat in silence for a while, just the clatter of dishes filling the space. Then he spoke again, softer this time. "Do you ever think we could, I don't know, have dinner sometime?" "Nothing fancy, just talk." I studied his face, the caution, the hope. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for pity. He was asking for a chance, maybe, I said. "We'll see." He nodded, accepting that as more than he'd expected. Fair enough. A customer called his name from across the diner. He stood, straightened his apron, and gave me one last look. "Thanks for not walking out when you saw me." "Thanks for giving me a reason not to," I said. He smiled, shy, genuine, and went back to work. I finished my coffee slowly, watching him move from table to table, not as the arrogant man who once demanded the world's attention, but as someone rebuilding brick by brick. When I left, I paid the cashier anyway and added a $20 bill under my empty cup. I didn't write a note. He'd know who it was from. A week later, a small envelope arrived at my office. Inside was a handwritten letter, uneven but earnest. "Dad, I found an old photo of Mom and me at the lake. I framed it for my apartment. I think about her every day now, not about what I lost, but what she gave. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope one day I'll earn it. If you ever want company for coffee again, you know where to find me." Love, Brandon. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside Lillian's journal in the drawer. For the first time, that drawer didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a record of what love looked like after it grew up. That Sunday, I visited Lillian's grave again. The daisies were fresh this time, their stems tucked neatly into the vase. Brandon had been there before me. I knelt and whispered, "He's trying. Lil, you'd be proud." And for the first time since the day she left, I could almost swear I heard her voice on the breeze, warm, soft, and smiling. "He'll find his way. Tommy, so will you." I stayed there a while, letting the quiet wash over me, until the sun dipped low and the headstones turned golden in its light. Then I stood, brushed the dirt from my knees, and walked back to the car with something new in my chest. Not grief, not anger, hope. By the end of that summer, the mountain evenings started cooling again, and with them came a strange, quiet balance. My days had settled into a rhythm I could almost call contentment. Mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons at the foundation office, evenings in the garden Lillian once tended. But sometimes, when the sun dipped low behind the Blue Ridge and the sky turned that honey gold color she used to love, I'd catch myself staring at the empty chair beside me. That's when the ache returned, not sharp anymore, but heavy, like a scar that still knows when it's going to rain. Then one Tuesday morning, a letter arrived. The envelope was simple, no return address. My name printed neatly on the front, Mr. Thomas Reed. Inside, a single card written in Brandon's handwriting. "Dad, the diner's hosting a community night next Friday. We're cooking for the shelter downtown. Free meals for anyone who needs them. I volunteered to run the kitchen shift. It would mean a lot if you came. You don't have to stay long." Brandon, I read the note twice, then left it on the counter beside my coffee mug. For 2 days I told myself I was too busy. The foundation had a board meeting, new scholarship applications to review. But every time I passed that letter, I felt Lillian's quiet persistence somewhere behind me. "Go, Tommy." He's asking without pride now. So Friday night I went. The diner's parking lot was half full, the neon sign flickering open against the deepening dusk. Inside, the smell hit me first. Onions, soup stock, the kind of homemade food Lillian called real kindness in a bowl. The chatter of volunteers, mixed with the clatter of dishes and the low hum of an old jukebox playing Sam. Cook Brandon was behind the counter in a white apron, hair tied back, shouting orders like a man who finally knew what work meant. "2 more trays for table 7. Keep the bread warm, guys. We're not serving cold kindness tonight." When he saw me in the doorway, he stopped mid-sentence. For a second, I thought he'd freeze. But then he smiled, just a flicker, and nodded toward an empty booth. "Grab a seat, Dad. I'll be right there." I sat near the window, watching him move. He wasn't polished, but he was purposeful. Sleeves rolled up, forehead streaked with sweat, the rhythm of someone who'd learned to care about the details. Every time a volunteer asked a question, he answered with patience. Every time a homeless man thanked him for a hot meal, he said, "Thank you for coming." When he finally slid into the booth across from me, he was out of breath and still grinning. "Didn't think you'd come." "Didn't think you'd ask," I said. He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, well, I'm trying to do things different now. Turns out helping people feels better than being helped." I nodded toward the crowded tables. "Looks like you've got a full house." "Yeah," he said proudly. "We partnered with the shelter downtown. I convinced the owner to donate a night's profits. Even Sienna stopped by earlier to drop off blankets. That surprised me." "You're speaking again." He shrugged. "She's remarried. Has a baby on the way, but she's nicer now. Maybe she needed to fall apart too." We sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the diner softening around us. Then Brandon leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Dad, I want to ask you something. Not for money, just advice." I raised an eyebrow. "That's new," he smiled faintly. "Yeah, it is." He hesitated. "There's a guy here, owns a small food truck, wants to sell and move out west. He said I could take over payments if I can scrape together $5,000. I've got almost 3. Think I should do it?" I studied him carefully. His eyes didn't flicker the way they used to when he was hiding something. This was real. A man asking, not a boy begging. "If you believe in it," I said, "and you're ready to work harder than you've ever worked, then yes. But if you're looking for easy money, you'll just build another house of cards." He nodded, the answer sinking in. No shortcuts. Got it. I pulled a folded check from my wallet. Not blank, but filled out, signed and dated. I'd written it weeks ago without admitting to myself why. He noticed it before I slid it across the table. Dad, it's a loan, I said. Not a gift. You'll sign an agreement, make payments, and I'll expect reports every month. He swallowed hard. You really mean that? I wouldn't waste a pen stroke otherwise. He took the check like it might vanish if he breathed too hard. Thank you, he whispered. Don't thank me. Make it work. I will. When he smiled this time, it wasn't the smile of the boy who used to manipulate his way through the world. It was the quiet, genuine smile of a man who'd finally learned what responsibility weighed like. 2 months later, the first Reed's roadside grill truck opened on the corner of Lexington and Hillcrest. Bright red silver trim, a chalkboard menu handwritten with care. The first day he sold out before noon. I didn't go to the grand opening, didn't want to steal his thunder, but I drove by after hours. Through the window, I saw him wiping down the counter, humming softly. The same tune Lillian used to hum when she cooked. That was when I knew she was there with him too, in every clean surface and every honest dollar he'd earned. A year after that, the diner hosted another charity night. This time Brandon invited me as guest of honor. The banner above the counter read, "In memory of Lillian Reed, feeding hope." When I arrived, the staff applauded. Brandon handed me a plate of food himself. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the kind Lillian would have made on Sundays. He raised a toast with his iced tea. To Mum, for teaching us that love means showing up. I stood beside him, my throat tight, and raised my glass too. And to second chances, the only thing worth earning twice. Applause filled the room, echoing against the chrome and glass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the ache of what was gone. I felt the warmth of what remained. Lillian would have smiled at that, and that night, as I left the diner under a sky full of stars, I whispered into the quiet, "We're okay now. Lil, you can rest easy." Because after all the reckonings, all the pain and punishment, forgiveness had finally found its way home. The winter that followed came and went like a guest who knew better than to overstay. By the next spring, life had grown roots again. Quiet, unhurried, real. Most mornings I still woke early. Not because I had to, but because old habits cling like vines. I'd make coffee in the same chipped mug Lillian used to claim as hers, then step out to the porch and watch the mist roll down from the hills. For years that view had reminded me of everything I'd lost. Now it reminded me of everything still standing. The foundation had grown larger than I'd ever imagined. Our office, once a single rented room, now took up half a floor in a refurbished building downtown. We'd given out 60 scholarships, funded 2 cancer wards, and donated a small library to the hospital where Lillian once worked. I still kept her photo in the front hallway. Her in that blue scarf, smiling like she'd just told me a joke I hadn't caught yet. People said it made the place feel like home. And then there was Brandon. He'd done what he promised. His food truck, Reed's Roadside Grill, had turned into a small chain when 3 trucks now, each parked in different parts of Asheville. His signature dish, Mom's mountain chicken sandwich, had people lining up before lunch. Every order came wrapped in paper, printed with one simple line, "Made with gratitude." That, he said, was his mother's motto. He paid back every dollar of the loan month by month. Always early. Always with a handwritten note attached. For Mom, for you. For who I should have been sooner. Sometimes he'd drop by the foundation office after a morning shift, smelling faintly of barbecue smoke. He'd bring coffee, still too strong, still too bitter. We'd sit on the balcony overlooking the city, talking about business, life, and small things that once seemed too ordinary to matter. He didn't talk much about Sienna anymore. I'd seen her once, passing by in town, stroller in hand, laughing with her new husband. Her face looked softer somehow, lighter. I'd felt no bitterness then. Life had a way of sorting itself out if you stopped trying to control the outcome. One afternoon, as we sat together, Brandon looked at me and said, "You know, I finally figured out what you meant when you fired me." "Oh yeah?" I asked. He nodded. "You weren't angry at me. You were saving me from myself." I let out a quiet laugh. That wasn't my plan at the time. "Well," he said, "it worked anyway." He hesitated then, his gaze on the mountains. "I met someone." I raised an eyebrow. "Someone?" He smiled sheepishly. "Her name's Ava. She volunteers at the shelter where we host the diner nights. She's kind. Doesn't care about what I used to have, only about what I'm building now. Your mother would have liked that, I said. Yeah, he whispered. That's how I knew she was right for me. The following year, Brandon invited me to a small gathering by the lake where Lillian used to take us on picnics. He said it was for the Foundation's anniversary celebration, a few students, donors, and volunteers. When I arrived, though, I realized it was something more. White chairs lined the dock. A local pastor stood by the water. And there, waiting at the end of the pier, was Brandon in a simple grey suit, hand in hand with a woman in a cream-colored dress, Ava. The moment I saw her, I understood everything. She wasn't dazzling in the way Sienna had been. She was calm, grounded. Her presence felt like sunlight after rain. When Brandon spotted me, he walked over quickly. Didn't want to tell you ahead of time, he said nervously. Didn't want you to feel obligated. I don't, I said, smiling. I feel invited. He let out a breath of relief, then hugged me, really hugged me. It wasn't the kind of quick, polite gesture we used to share. It was steady, long, the kind you give someone you've stopped trying to impress. As the ceremony began, the pastor spoke of second chances, forgiveness, and grace, words that felt less like religion and more like truth. When it came time for the vows, Brandon's voice shook. He promised to build, not borrow, to give, not take, to show up always. I knew those weren't just vows to Ava. They were to Lillian, and maybe to me. When he kissed his bride, the wind stirred the lake and carried the scent of daisies, her favorite flower, across the water. I closed my eyes and smiled. If there was ever a sign that Lillian was watching, that was it. After the ceremony, while the small crowd shared food and laughter, Brandon and Ava walked over. She handed me a single daisy. He said this was his mother's flower. I nodded. It was. Then, she said gently, it should always be part of our family. Brandon placed an arm around her shoulders. Dad, he said quietly, I named the new scholarship after her, and after you. The Thomas and Lillian Reed Second Chance Grant. It's for students who messed up somewhere along the way but are trying to start over. I felt something catch in my throat. That's perfect, he smiled. Yeah, I figured we'd finally built something together. We stood there for a long time, watching the water turn gold with sunset. And I realized this, the long road, the pain, the reckonings, it hadn't been about punishment at all. It had been about repair, about taking something broken and rebuilding it, stronger than before. Lillian would have called it love doing its hardest work. That night, after everyone left, Brandon stayed to help fold chairs and pack up. Before I drove home, he said, Hey, Dad? Yes? Thanks for not giving up on me. I smiled at him through the windshield. You made it worth the wait. When I got home, I placed the daisy Ava had given me beside Lillian's photo. Then I sat in my chair and looked out at the stars. The same stars she used to wish on when life was still new, still wide open. For the first time in years, I didn't speak to her as someone gone. I spoke to her like someone listening. We did it, Lil, I said softly. Fai's home. And in that quiet, I swear the wind through the open window whispered back, I know, Tommy, I know. 2 years passed before I truly understood what peace felt like. Not the kind of peace that comes from silence or distance or money. The kind that comes from watching something broken learn how to stand again. Brandon and Ava's little family grew faster than I'd expected. The following spring, they had a daughter. They named her Lily after her grandmother. The first time I held her, I felt something shift inside me, not guilt, not nostalgia, but a deep, quiet gratitude. She had Ava's calmness, Brandon's eyes, and the faintest dimple that reminded me of Lillian every time she smiled. When she gripped my finger for the first time, I realized I'd been waiting years for that small, simple forgiveness I hadn't known I needed. Brandon's business kept growing. He and Ava turned Reed's roadside grill into a small cafe, the first stationary location, built in a refurbished warehouse just 2 blocks from the diner where I'd seen him rebuild himself. The sign above the door said, Lily's Table, good food, honest work. He'd insisted on naming it after his daughter, and the motto, he told me, came straight from Lillian. Opening day was a blur of chatter, the smell of roasting chicken and fresh bread, music spilling out the door onto the sidewalk. Brandon moved through it all like a conductor, greeting old friends, flipping burgers, serving coffee. But when he saw me arrive, Holding a bouquet of daisies, he stopped what he was doing, wiped his hands, and hugged me in front of everyone. "Wouldn't be here without you," he said simply. I shook my head. "Wouldn't be here without her," he smiled. We both know that's the same thing. As the months passed, Lily's table became something of a neighborhood anchor. Families came after church, nurses from the hospital stopped in after shifts, and a line of regulars formed every morning for coffee and pie. Brandon set up a corner shelf with photos, Lillian smiling in her garden, our old family picture. Even one of the foundation's first scholarship recipients, Eleanor, now a nurse who often dropped by to help on weekends, he'd found a way to merge all the pieces, work, love, redemption, memory, into one quiet breathing space. And every time I visited, I could almost feel Lillian there too. I'd catch glimpses of her in the sunlight catching a coffee cup, in the sound of laughter drifting from the kitchen. It wasn't haunting anymore. It was home. One Saturday afternoon, I sat by the cafe window with a cup of coffee while Brandon prepped for the lunch rush. Little Lily toddled around clutching a crayon, babbling to herself as she drew circles on a napkin. Ava moved gracefully through the tables, checking on customers, smiling that warm smile that made everyone want to stay just a little longer. "Dad," Brandon called from the counter. "She's got your frown when she concentrates. Look at that." I looked over, and sure enough, Lily was squinting exactly the way I used to when checking blueprints. We all laughed. A real laugh, full and easy. The kind you only earn after a lifetime of hard lessons. Later that evening, as the cafe emptied and the last customers lingered over pie, Brandon poured us each a cup of coffee and sat across from me. "You ever think about Mom?" he asked softly. "Every day," I said, "but not with sadness anymore. Just thankfulness," he nodded. "Sometimes when I'm closing up, I talk to her. Out loud, tell her how the day went, what Lily learned, what we sold. I know it sounds crazy." "It doesn't," I said. "I still talk to her too. She listens." He smiled faintly. "Yeah, I think she does." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, I used to think you took everything from me. But now I see you gave me the one thing I never had. A chance to earn it all myself. Maybe that's the only real inheritance worth having," I said. He lifted his cup. "To second chances," I raised mine. "To doing the right thing even when it hurts." We clinked the cups together. The sound was soft, but it echoed in the space between us like a promise kept. That night as I drove home, the air was clear and cool. I took the long route past Riverside Cemetery. The gates were closed, but from the hilltop road I could see the faint shimmer of Lillian's headstone under the moonlight. I stopped the car, rolled down the window, and spoke quietly into the night. "You'd be proud. Lil, he's doing it right this time." The wind brushed through the open window, gentle and warm. It felt like a hand on my shoulder. The following month, the foundation launched its newest program, the Lillian and Thomas Reed Family Fund, offering grants to single parents starting small businesses. Brandon and Ava were there at the ribbon cutting, little Lily clutching a daisy bouquet that was almost as big as she was. When the local paper asked for a quote, I said, "Sometimes you build with hammers and wood. Sometimes you build with forgiveness," Brandon added quietly. "And sometimes you rebuild yourself," the reporter smiled. Scribbling our words, neither of us cared about the article. We just looked at each other and knew we'd come full circle that evening. After everyone left, I lingered at the foundation's garden. The air smelled of spring, wet earth and magnolias. I knelt by the daisy bed we'd planted in Lillian's memory and whispered, "You were right about everything." It just took us a while to catch up. A voice behind me said, "Dad, come eat. Dinner's getting cold." Brandon stood at the doorway, holding Lily on his hip. She waved a chubby little hand and said, "Papa." I smiled, standing slowly. "Coming," I said, as I turned to follow them inside. I looked once more at the garden, glowing soft under the porch light. It didn't feel like an ending anymore. It felt like the middle of something finally right. 3 years later, the world looked softer. Maybe it was age, maybe it was peace, or maybe it was simply that I'd finally stopped fighting with ghosts. The grief had faded into something gentler, like a scar that no longer hurt when touched, and in its place grew a quiet pride that filled the spaces where sorrow used to live. Brandon and Ava had bought a small house on the edge of town, the kind with a picket fence and a swing that creaked just enough to sound like childhood every Sunday. I'd drive over for dinner. Ava cooked simply, the way Lillian used to. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and that lemon pie Brandon could never quite replicate, no matter how many times he tried. Little Lily was 5 now, curious, loud, endlessly alive. She followed me everywhere when I visited, asking questions about everything. Why the grass grew, why birds sang, why her daddy called me the reason he works so hard. I'd laugh and tell her, because sometimes, Lily, people have to earn the right to be proud again. She didn't understand. Of course, but one day she would. One bright morning, Brandon came to my house alone. He brought coffee and that serious look that only shows up when a son has something big to say. "Dad," he started, "I've been thinking." "You're not getting any younger," I laughed. "That's one way to start a conversation." He grinned sheepishly. "What I mean is, I want you to slow down. You've carried this foundation for years. It's time I helped carry it too." I studied him for a long moment. The man sitting across from me wasn't the reckless boy I'd raised. He was calm, steady, carved by the years he'd earned. "You're sure?" I asked. He nodded. "You taught me what legacy really means. It's not about what we leave behind. It's about what we build that outlives us." I leaned back in my chair, smiling. "That sounds like something your mother would have said." He looked out the window toward Lillian's garden. "I think she's been teaching both of us this whole time." That summer, I handed him the official papers. He became executive director of the Lillian and Thomas Reed Foundation. We had a small ceremony at the community center. Nothing fancy, just the board members, a few scholarship students, and family. Brandon gave a short speech. He stood at the podium, voice strong but trembling with emotion. "My father taught me that love isn't what you give when it's easy," he said. "It's what you hold steady when everything else falls apart. This foundation isn't just about education or charity. It's about learning how to rebuild, and remembering that sometimes rebuilding starts with forgiveness." When he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, not even mine. The years that followed were kind. The foundation flourished under his care. More scholarships, more programs, more people touched by the quiet legacy of one woman who'd loved the world fiercely, and one man who'd finally learned how to follow her example on weekends. I taught Lily how to plant daisies in the garden. She called them Grandma's flowers. Every time she placed one in the dirt, she'd say, "Grow strong, Grandma." And somehow they always did. Brandon and Ava's cafe expanded into 2 more locations. They started offering free meals to the homeless every Thursday, a tight tradition that became known around town as Lillian's Night. Locals donated supplies. Volunteers lined up. No one left hungry. It became more than charity. It became a rhythm of the town itself. One evening, years later, I sat on my porch, the air heavy with the smell of rain. Lily, now 8, sat beside me, swinging her legs, a blanket draped over her shoulders. "Papa," she asked, "what was Grandma Lillian like?" I smiled at the question, one I'd been waiting for. "She was the bravest person I ever met," I said. "She taught your dad what kindness costs, and she taught me what love really means." "Did she like daisies because they're pretty?" She asked. "No," I said, "because they always turn toward the sun, no matter how long the night's been." She nodded, satisfied with the answer, and rested her head on my arm. The rain started, soft, steady, familiar. For a long time we just listened. When I passed a few years later, the town said it was peaceful, in my sleep early morning. The same hour I used to make coffee for 2. Brandon found me in my chair by the window, a cup half full beside me, a daisy pressed between the pages of Lillian's journal, at my funeral. He stood before friends, neighbors, and strangers whose lives the foundation had touched. He didn't read from notes. He didn't need to. "My father taught me that justice and love aren't opposites," he said softly. "They're just 2 hands holding the same heart." He taught me that forgiveness doesn't erase what was wrong. It turns it into something worth remembering. He taught me how to be a man my mother would be proud of. And for that I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make him proud too. When he stepped back, Ava took his hand. Little Lily placed a single daisy on my casket, and in that moment, sunlight breaking through clouds, laughter mixing with tears, my story, our story, came full circle years later. In the garden of the Foundation's new headquarters, there stood a bronze plaque under a bed of daisies. The Lillian and Thomas Reed Foundation, built on love. sustained by forgiveness. Dedicated to second chances every spring, Lily visits that garden, pressing new flowers into the soil, and each time she does, she whispers the same words her grandmother once told me when we were young and foolish and hopeful. Do what's right, even when it hurts, because that's how our family learned to love, not perfectly, not easily, but truly.